Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week, nearly in the middle of May. A point of change, really, for us socially and economically as a society, as we're kind of coming out of lockdown and seeing a few more people within our friendship circle and family circle. But also politically, we had the results of the election start to come out, and we're kind of dealing with the progress or fallout from that. But also for our Year 11 members of our King Henry community, this is a point of real change for them as they approach the end of their Key Stage 4 learning and curriculum and start to move into Key Stage 5. And also in terms of the weather, it's rainy one day and sunny the next. So we've got 1 foot in the winter and 1 foot in the summer. But I feel that it's really right time for soul searching and a really right time for this assembly. Have a look at the picture in front of you. And I wonder if any of you recognise this young man. Form tutors, you might want to pause at this point just to give the students a chance to really look at the picture and maybe have a quick discussion about whether we recognise him. The picture is of a young man called Folajimi Olubunmi Adewale. In April, late April, just after midnight one day, one Saturday, Jimmy was with his friend around London Bridge, and they saw a young woman fall into the River Thames. Now, after calling the emergency service, they were really worried about the timing of things and whether the woman would survive. So Jimmy jumped into the river to try to save her. Now, the emergency services did eventually arrive, and they were able to save the woman and the other young man who jumped in, but they weren't able to save Jimmy. His body was found just after 6 a.m. later that day. Think about this. Have a quick chat between yourselves. What are some of the words you would use to describe Jimmy's character? Would they be some of the words also used by his father, perhaps? His father said he was a kind young man, ambitious, respectful, and pure-hearted. Thinking about his actions on that night, the final actions of his life, how would you describe his character? This is Jessica. I met Jessica on my very first day at King Henry School, which was 3 weeks ago. I was on the Hanover corridor, and I was approached by a Year 7 student who wasn't quite sure where she should go next for period 2. She was lost. The student did the right thing by approaching me, but what they didn't know was that it was also my first day. So I was a little bit confused as well in terms of trying to navigate my way around. As we both stood there in the corridor in the middle of changeover, quite confused, Jessica joined us. And she said, "Miss, I know where this student needs to be. Let me take her." Then she looked at the student and she said, "It's okay. I know where your class is. I'll show you." Now, thinking of Jessica's actions in that moment, what words would you use to describe her character? The first thing that hit me in that moment, and something I doubt I will ever forget, was Jessica's extraordinary kindness. She wasn't the first person to walk past us in that corridor, probably not the first Year 7 student to walk past us in that corridor, but she was the first person to sense a need and respond in kindness to that need. Another thing that hit me was Jessica's extraordinary courage. Now, it's very likely this was period 2, that Jessica had just seen the assembly introducing me that morning, and she might have known that I was the new deputy head teacher, but she had no idea how I would have reacted to her taking control of that situation. She didn't know she was going to get told off by me for taking too long to get to her next lesson. She didn't know if I would have trusted her to take that student and get the student to her next lesson. But in the face of all those concerns, her courage kicked in and she did what she had to do, regardless of any potentially negative outcome. So we have in these two stories of these two individuals, Jessica and Jimmy, examples of exhibiting the same character traits through actions. yes, to varying degrees, but the same character traits, essentially. And that's what today's assembly is about, character. At the end of this assembly, we aim to be able to understand what character is, what extraordinary character is in the context of King Henry, and to understand why character education is relevant or necessary to us all. So character then, what's character? Character, as you can see defined there, is the way someone thinks and feels and behaves. It is the core of you, the most important thing about you, because it actually drives certain actions that you take and stops certain actions that you might want to take. You've heard people say this is in somebody's character, or it's not in their character to behave like that. Now, character isn't actually static. So you just don't become a kind person and that is it. Character is taught, is learned, it's manual to automatic. And even when it becomes automatic, you keep getting tested in life. It never stops developing, it never stops getting sharpened, and it never stops being tested. What's extraordinary character? We like to talk about being extraordinary as part of King Henry's School. It's our main primary core value. But we've broken it down into these 6 character traits that are also part of our core values that link into being extraordinary and feed off of being extraordinary. Respect, politeness, courage, kindness, ambition, and resilience. And each of those 6 core values feed into the idea of us being extraordinary people, extraordinary learners, and actually together being an extraordinary school. Having it in our character to be respectful, to listen politely and speak to each other with kindness and tolerance at all times, regardless of what we feel. Now that's a tough one, because sometimes we might be feeling anger or anxiety, or like we've been disrespected, or like we have a point to prove and that person just has to listen. We're absolutely right about our point and we have to be heard. Now, we've all been there, staff and students. We don't always get it right, but we can keep trying. And it's such an amazing thing to be able to have control of your emotions to the extent that despite any negative feelings you might have in a moment about a person or towards a person or a situation, that you still speak to that person and relate to them with kindness, politeness, and respect. Having it in our character to be ambitious for ourselves, meaning we're always ready to learn. We arrive on time, we've got our equipment, we're dressed appropriately, we're ready to soak in the knowledge that will equip us for life and raise the bar each day, each lesson of what we know, what we understand about ourselves and the world around us. Having it in our character to drive through difficulty and failure, that's extraordinary. The courage to face a difficult task in class and not give up, but instead work out a plan to tackle the issue. What do I need to do? Now that plan might involve asking your teacher for help, or going back over the past work, or just focusing and concentrating a bit more. But you have the courage to face that task regardless. The resilience to pick yourself up when you've got a lesson period 4 that you know that you sometimes struggle with. It's just been lunchtime, you're thinking, I should drag myself there. But actually showing up anyway, showing up on time, because this just might be the day that it all falls into place. These character traits don't just come about automatically in a person. As you go through life, what you'll realize is that, as I said before, these aspects of your character are repeatedly tested. And that's why in 21C sessions, we have been and will continue to teach you about these character traits. But more than just teaching you about the character traits, we're also going to model it. So each of you modeling these character traits to each other. We've already starting with a great model in Jessica, but also teachers modeling, staff modeling, and each of you modeling to each other and supporting each other as we build up and solidify those character traits in one another. And then also celebrating these character traits, celebrating it through reward points, celebrating it through a mention in assembly or a mention in a house meeting or a mention to your parents, but celebrating when you exhibit this extraordinary character. Because actually, every one of us matters. Every individual, every member of the King Henry School body matters. And when you exhibit these character traits, you're practicing and you're taking ownership of your role in our society, and you're strengthening those character traits within yourself, which feeds into our school community, feeds into how we do things here. At King Henry School, they are kind. Every single one of us contributing to that vision of our school, all of us being representatives towards the school, Bexley, the world community of who we are and how we do things here. If we all play our part, we can be and continue to be an extraordinary school. So I want to leave you with this takeaway then. This is a quote from a basketball player and coach called John Wooden. He says, "Be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are." Now, what does that mean? It means that if you do it or feel it or act it with nobody around, nobody to reward you, nobody to control and say you're doing the right thing, etc., that's who you really are. That is your character. And it's not your reputation, which is just what others think you are, because your reputation can change from situation to situation depending on who's around you. So I'll leave you with that takeaway. Have a fantastic week. And I hope to see lots of examples of those King Henry core characters: politeness, kindness, respect, ambition, courage, and resilience. Have a good week.